Welcome to our spoiler review slash retrospective of, or whatever you want to call it, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We're going to go into deep spoilers and analysis of this film. Okay, so sit back and relax and make sure you leave your comments down below about your thoughts on the film and your thoughts on our discussion as well. Like I said, if you have not seen the movie, I do recommend going to see it and then coming back and watching this video here on World of Geekdom. Joining me, he was on World of Geekdom before for other spoiler reviews, and he also was on the KLB, he's the co-host of the KLB, but he's also on the Geekdom 101 podcast. Welcome back, Brandon Draven, to World of Geekdom. Hello.
I'm gonna stutter throughout the entire review like Rick Dalton. No, I'm not gonna do that.
I thought you were making fun of me there for a second, but yeah. Well, the best part about Rick Dalton is when he was in the dressing room. You stupid mother, because we've all been there before. Now, I've never done any actual acting, but I've done like live stuff, especially recently at conventions, and you're kicking yourself in the ass, bro. So all right, first thing we gotta say here about this movie, Brad Pitt, best role of his career in my opinion. I think he was my favorite Brad Pitt performance of all time. And Leonardo DiCaprio as Rick Dalton was everybody was good in this movie when it comes to acting.
Everybody was awesome. Everybody, even the Madsen family people that they didn't have a lot of screen time, but whatever they got to perform, they were also very good.
Even Damian Luis as Steve McQueen was great, bro. And even Al Pacino as Marvin Schwartz the Jew, bro.
Oh, not Schwartz. Schwartz. I love that inside joke, bro. Not Schwartz. It was Schwartz.
Schwartz, yes. And also, I want to say another thing before we go into it. Red Letter Media said this too. I have even more respect for Tarantino because he's one of the only filmmakers that is still left who's not doing corporate, paycheck movies. Now, no disrespect to the Russos. We all love those guys, or even Johnny.
They have my favorite movie of the year still.
Yeah, and Jon Favreau is talented, even though Lion King was trash. But Quentin Tarantino still shoots on film.
35mm film.
Yeah, or 70 if he's doing a special scene, whatever.
Hateful Eight was in 70.
Hateful Eight. And he still wants to write original stories or do these wacky retellings of the past. And I like that. I like that he still preserves the purity of filmmaking, even though I feel like in the future we're losing guys like that. If he retires, it's going to suck. When he retires.
One of the things, let's dive right into this. One of the things that I've heard criticized. Let's talk a little bit about this real quick.
Go for it.
Is the methodical nature of this film, right? And I agree with it. It is very methodical. It is a little slow. It takes its time.
And it also, people feel like the narrative structure was kind of a waste of time because, nothing really, quote, happens till the very end and all that. But I don't know if I really agree with that because I think
there's a lot that happens. But
yeah.
Let me finish my point here.
Yeah.
A couple of things. First of all, Tarantino has gone on record that he loves to write characters.
Right. He's the best at it, in my opinion, right now.
He loves to write characters that we could come and want to hang out with time and time again. That's why his films, this is a trip. This is a talent that this man has. Any film that he makes, it has rewatchability value, even though they're not the fastest paced films ever. But the thing is, because his characters are so good, you want to kind of hang out with the characters time and time again. And that's what he's always said. Is like, my films are not really about the plot. It's about the characters and how you want to kind of just be with them. So in order to do that, you have to create scenarios where these characters are allowed to breathe a little bit. These characters are allowed to kind of emote or perform. You can't have an hour and 30-minute movie where you don't really get to spend time with the characters. So that's why he needs this kind of time to tell his stories. And I think that's one of the criticisms that this film gets, is that people there's a lot of misconceptions about this film when people went to see it. First of all, I honestly believe that people wanted to see a Madsen movie, and unfortunately they did not get that at all.
Well, in their defense though, the early talk of this film was that it was going to be a Charles Manson heavy film. I mean, but that's more of like the movie audience, more, you know what I'm saying? It's more like the nerds that thought it was going to be a Manson movie. It definitely was not that. And I did want to see more Bruce Lee, but not because of
That's a great scene.
Me being a fan of Bruce Lee, but because I love the way Tarantino portrayed him, because for years people have wondered, was Bruce Lee really that tough? See, there was some truth to that, because there's a few martial artists who have said, because it's like, with all due respect to Bruce Lee, that nowadays in this era of, I don't want to say mixed martial artists, but in this era of how much knowledge we have about the human body, that there's other guys who would be just as tough as he is. It's just that he was ahead of the curve. You know, that's always going to be a discussion among people who like Bruce Lee.
Well, as we know, his martial arts doesn't really work in the real world. That's a fact, or else we would have these guys dominating MMA or whatever.
But we also know he was a legitimate tough guy.
Well, yeah, do we though? I mean,
well, we've heard. That's the best I can say.
He was a great philosopher. I'll give you that. He had a lot of great lifeisms that
and made some good movies.
No, definitely. But another thing about this film is that. And this is I'm always against this because I feel that every film, especially if it's going to be distributed nationally, should relate to the general audience. But you really have to understand Quentin Tarantino as a filmmaker and where he's coming from, and that's where it starts right there. If you don't understand that, you're not gonna like this movie.
He's a big fan of film. We went over it in our podcast, and this movie is a love letter. People have said this a bunch of times, but it's true. It is a love letter to that 60s era of film. You know, I guess can you call this like the pre-Spielberg, pre-Lucas? What would you even call this era?
Well, okay, that's what this film is about. It's about the last actors of the studio system. First of all, this film is a semi-biographical film on Burt Reynolds because Rick Dalton is based on Burt Reynolds, who in the 60s had a great career as a television performer and had trouble assimilating to the new Hollywood, which were the first film school graduates. Because before the Spielbergs, the whole UCLA USC class of Spielberg and George Lucas and these guys and Martin Scorsese, you had what was called the studio system, which was a monopolized industry where they would they would mold you as a young man, and you would go into their studio system, and they would train you, and you would rise up the ranks within the studio. And you had actors who would sign contracts, and you couldn't work for Fox or Universal. You had if you signed a contract with Paramount, you could only do Paramount movies, and Fox movies. Once in a while they would do trades, but that was rare. And so that was the industry back then, and you were brought up to be more of a stage performer. And so all this shit that started to change in the 70s with the more of what we call the Italian neorealism, with movies like The Bicycle Thief and stuff like that, where now you're using real exteriors, you're using these progressive directors, like Easy Rider is one of the first films that really brought into like things that were happening in the real world, like very dark. The 70s became very dark because those new filmmakers were trying to reflect what was going on in society. So a lot of these old school actors, they weren't ready for that, bro. They were used to film sets.
And I think the Al Pacino scene in the first act is what sets that up.
Well, also what sets that up is when the director of Lancer wants to dress up Rick Dalton. Rick Dalton's like, what the fuck? Like this is me. This is how I come to work. And then he wants to put a wig on him and the wacky jacket. And you see that like all of a sudden Rick Dalton is in a foreign land, in a foreign world that he doesn't really understand anymore. So to cut to the chase here, this story, if you were to ask me what it's really about, it's about the end of an era and how actors of a previous era are being cast out and how they come to terms with that. And that's really the story there, because Rick Dalton represents a lot of actors from that era that are like
Burt Reynolds, he did revitalize his career. He did.
Like there's a lot.
He didn't tell Shawn Michaels about his chest hair, but he did revitalize his career.
Like there was guys like Lee Van Cleef and the guy from Star Wars in the beginning. What was his name? The guy from The Exorcist.
You're talking about Max von Sydow?
Max von Sydow. I mean, all these guys really went to a downtime because they couldn't assimilate to the new Hollywood, and then some of them faded out. There's a lot of actors that if I tell their name, you wouldn't even know because they faded out, but they were big stars pre-1969, and then some of them made it. So again, everything that we just talked about, see, you have to go...
And even Sharon Tate, I feel like she became more famous for the Manson murders than for her actual film career. I think that's the way people look at her.
We're going to get to her.
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things. So real quick, positives of the movie. Again, the characters. I did feel some of the scenes dragged on for way too long. I've said this before. The scene with Roman Polanski driving with Sharon Tate was completely pointless to me. They could have cut that entire scene out. Lots of scenes of people driving. Now, everything with Cliff Booth driving, especially the conversation that he had with the girl. So, a couple of things. The Cliff Booth stuff was all great to me. I saw nothing. That was flawless because... everything from the fact that Cliff Booth having that secret history of did he kill his wife or not. Then he has this girl who's not 18 and he doesn't want to have sex with her because he knows he could end up getting locked up for that. And he straight up resists. What Tarantino's telling the audience is that this character is not a loose cannon. He's a thinker. He thinks. He's methodical. You know, like Dave says that Kane does all the time. He's always thinking, and he's not gonna risk his life over some girl, right? That's number one. Number two, the scene where he goes and he talks to Bruce Dern, George Spahn, was great because they showed right there that he's a loyal person, and that ends up being that plays into the finale with the Madsen invasion because he stays loyal to Rick Dalton even when they're not together, even when Rick does his own thing, there's still that bond, that friendship. It's like they weren't on screen that much together, but you can sense they still had that mutual respect. So I think all of that was great. Now, to your point, before we started recording, I told you the Sharon Tate theater scene. I did not really understand that scene, but you told me you had an explanation for it because I thought it was a waste of time. But what did you think?
Okay, well, before I get to the Sharon Tate scene, let's talk a little bit about the driving scenes. Well, people forget. Again, we've really kind of, and it's not that people forgot. It's not their fault because Tarantino does a lot of films tailor-made for cinephiles, and we're seeing a lot more of that, like with Ari Aster's movie out there, and I like that because finally there's a recognition of films that are done outside the way Hollywood does films, which I enjoy. But these kind of films are made for a niche audience, and they're not something that your casual audience is used to, so they kind of freak out and they don't really know how to register that. But here's the thing, when filmmakers are making movies, one of the things that we forget is that the entire frame is used to tell a story, and you're watching. It's like I've said before, Quentin Tarantino believes in a pure cinematic experience. So those driving scenes, we also forget that everything he does is practical because he fucking hates digital. He doesn't do anything digital. Everything's practical. So when you're seeing the driving scenes, especially with Polanski, everything's done live right there. It's on the camera. So
I didn't like that scene, man. It was pointless.
But it really wasn't though. He was using a lot of camera techniques to show you the passage of time. He was using, not everything has to be verbalized. He was, first of all,
I know. I'm just saying, for me, it dragged on. It really did.
But he was also, and another thing, the reason Polanski was there because he was the juxtaposition to Rick Dalton because Polanski was one of the new waves of filmmakers.
Yes.
So here he was, one of the things that Tarantino did so great was showing Polanski who was the new wave filmmaker like the other ones I just said earlier, and he was in this big mansion and he was above Rick Dalton, who was kind of being cast out of Hollywood.
Yes.
I thought that was a great visual, and the symbolism there was phenomenal. I really marked out for that when I saw that because it spoke to me in a lot of ways. And the driving scenes, having a film background, like it was just a joy to watch because those scenes are very hard to do. And it was all done in with practical camera.
Do you think that the movie is better if you're? I would say the answer is yes, but is the movie better if you're more familiar with filmmaking?
Yeah, and that's one thing. That's one thing that I will. It's nobody's fault. Like that's the film that Tarantino's gonna make, but
it was made to pop the marks, bro. Essentially, that's kind of what you're saying.
But I do not blame the general audience for being upset or being bored because. How are they supposed to get that kind of context? It's not. Right. It's not really their fault. You can't really blame them for that. But to me, if you were to tell me, well, we can't have these films because the general audience gets bored, I would say,
right.
what, fuck that.
I agree.
Because you know what? Here it is. In a year, you're gonna get 1,000 Hollywood movies, bro. We're only gonna get 1 or 2 Tarantino style movies a year that are gonna be on the big screen. So you know what? Just give me that. Fuck it. I'm being selfish. Just give me that. And everybody else could have their fucking Hobbs and Shaw or whatever, I don't care.
Right.
Because we're gonna have 1,000 of those anyway. Mm-hmm. So that was what's going on there with the Polanski scene.
Now, what about the movie theater scene with Sharon Tate? Because I thought it was gonna build up to something later, and it wound up.
Well, here's the thing about that performance. And I thought Margot Robbie did a great job because she only has like 3 lines in the entire fucking movie.
She was very charismatic, bro. She was hot too. She was great.
I think that plays on the fact that Tarantino really wanted to drive home the point of how tragic this story really was. I think that scene itself was very tragic because he did it from the perspective of the real Sharon Tate. And what the really emotional part of that scene is how she was about to blow up, bro. She was this was her moment, and when she's so happy to see the people get excited for her, and she's kind of coming into the theater, and they're playing her movie, The Wrecking Crew, which is a pretty good movie, by the way.
But okay, but in Quentin Tarantino world, she did survive. See what I'm saying? So,
But that's not what he's trying to say. He's trying to remind us of her tragedy, even after we see the fairy tale ending.
So if you don't know anything about the Madsen murders, that scene's gonna get lost on you. Now I knew, but
that scene is gonna get lost. And also, if you don't emotionally connect to the real Sharon Tate, then that scene's really gonna get lost. I agree with you.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that scene would have been more effective if she did end up getting murdered, but she didn't. So it's just very weird to me, you know.
But it's also in hindsight. In hindsight, you know, you see how this girl had she had a whole future ahead of her, and yet these fucking assholes, these fucking pieces of shit, you know, took her away from us, you know, and that was what he was trying to say there, is like, this is where she was going, and there's an innocence to her in that scene. There's this like girlish nature to her, very like naive in a lot of ways. And that's very sad, because when you think about what really happened, that's where it hits you that scene has even more impact, because he's showing you where she was headed had this not happened. And actually, to piggyback on that, the ending is also very sad, because not only there's a lot of actors like Rick Dalton who didn't make it, although in this fairy tale he did make it, because he ended up meeting Polanski, and then you imagine that he was going to be put in movies. But in the real world, like, there's a lot of people like Rick Dalton who were cast aside, you know, and were never heard from again.
They had a few years on top, and then they were just cast. It happens to, I mean, look, our boy Nick Cage, bro.
Now let me talk a little bit about the Cleve Booth and Rick Dalton dynamic here, because it goes to your point that you were talking about. So it's interesting because there's another juxtaposition there, where they're both at a crossroads, because both of their careers are on the toilet, both Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton. And what Tarantino does so good is that he shows you how perspective is everything, because they're both reacting to their situations completely different. Now, Cliff Booth, who's a Vietnam War vet, you know, Cliff Booth has seen a lot of shit. He's probably killed people. He's also,
and don't forget that scene where early in the film he's on the roof and whatnot. Like, they're basically showing you he's a tough guy, and then Brad Pitt, you know, when he punches the guy in the face fucking with his tires, like, you know, that the whole movie was built up. See, this is good booking, bro. Not to bring it back to wrestling, but you've got this baby face they've been building up the entire movie, Cliff Booth. Then you've got the heel, which is Charles Manson, but you weren't really sure of that yet. So you knew, like, I don't know about you, but I called it. The minute that the Manson family was going to break in and see Cliff Booth, I knew he was going to take them out. I knew they were going to pull a Hitler, and he was going to take them out. That's exactly what happened, bro. But it wasn't easy, because he got hurt. But I love how he got hurt, despite still being a tough guy, and yet Rick Dalton is like a phony actor, but he still has that friendship. You know what I mean? He still gives them the friendship, you know, which Cliff Booth needs in his life. He might be tough, but he's also a lonely man.
That's right, and they show you that in the beginning, where he's feeding his dog and he's in that trailer.
Yep.
But
no, it's a very well made film. I just want to say that.
But what they also show you is how both of them are kind of coming to terms with their situation of pretty much being unemployed, whereas one has had a very tough life, where, you know, he's seen a lot of shit, and he's taking it day to day. He's not allowing that situation to get him down. Why? Because he's already been through a lot of fucked up shit. Whereas Rick Dalton, who's very spoiled and entitled and has had a great career up into 1969, he's being more of a little bitch about it. He can't take it. He can't take that change. So I love how Tarantino showed us the same situation for both men, but how one reacted to their situation, while the other one was kind of like, you know, freaking out. So you have both of them, you know. Cliff Booth, you could sense that gratitude. You could sense the idea of, like, yeah, I'm in this situation where I'm about to be unemployed, but I'm alive because I've seen other stuff, and I'm gonna take it day to day. And I love that, because he never loses his cool, because he knows that death is around the corner. So to him, he's just gonna be thankful for the day. Whereas Rick Dalton is over here getting drunk and trying to numb his pain and freaking out. And I love that stuff, and that was one of the interesting dynamic of those two characters, because it really drove home the point of the movie, which is change. And another thing too, this movie is very personal to Tarantino, because he's also going through the same change right now.
And he lived in L.A., so there's a lot of that L.A. stuff. I asked you about that. You live out there. I don't live out there, but he did a lot of that cinematography to make it look like how it used to.
But even Tarantino's in this weird era of his career where it's not how it was when he was coming up. You know, we live in a very PC world where you can't do the things he was saying.
Right, and I find it very interesting, bro, that now this is not planned, but the movie came out like the same week, was it, that Lion King, or the week after? Lion King is a perfect example of the opposite of this movie. Homogenized corporate remake bullshit. This movie is original. It's shot on film. It has real actors. It has characters. You know, it's almost like it was the universe synchronicity kind of made it like, okay, you can go see this pile of trash, even though the original was a classic, or you can see this original movie.
That's right, and that's a very good observation. And even I do love that ending where they're both kind of saying, you know, when Rick Dalton comes back and says like, I can't afford you anymore, so this is our goodbye. And then you have the whole Madsen family thing at the end, and who's the one that symbolically still doing all the stunt work for Rick Dalton? Fucking Cliff Booth, bro, in the living room. I love that little fucking symbolism right there, where their last night that they're gonna hang out and get fucked up. One last time, Cliff Booth is the one that fucking does all the action scenes for fucking Rick Dalton, who's for all intents and purposes kicking back.
But the flamethrower was awesome, though. The flamethrower.
That was a nice little thing. That was a nice little fucking that had the fucking theater in hysterics. Now I will say one thing.
Yes. The movie shifted in tone very fast.
But it goes back to what we're talking about, where we live in different times, and Tarantino has to deal with that. First of all, he's got to deal with that whole Harvey Weinstein blowback, which he's been dealing with. He's been getting a lot of criticism over that, and also,
don't forget the Sharon Tate does not have enough lines in the movie. And he said, "I reject your hypothesis." I know you've seen the interview, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, but that wasn't the point. I think Sharon Tate was more of our emotional hook to the movie, and I for the reasons that I just explained. Now, unfortunately, if you couldn't catch on with that emotional hook, which you say you couldn't, then you're gonna lose a little bit from that movie, which is fine,
Yeah, I didn't think her character was that important in this film. Be honest with you,
but I caught it, and I understood what he was trying to say with that.
I actually thought the little girl reading the book was way more important than her.
That's my first scene in the movie, bro.
It's a great scene, and then Luke Perry right after.
Because that's the you're talking about the Rick Dalton reading his little book compared to the little girl. Yes. And when she asks for the synopsis of his book, he's telling her the story of the book, but that's his story.
That's his story.
You know, about the young guy who can't hack it anymore, and then he starts to cry, and then she's like, she's there for him,
And she puts him over and later on.
Right. So
boosting his confidence.
The entire scene of Rick Dalton.
But also, I just want to say one more thing real quick. I love the scene where she puts him over, because the reason why Rick Dalton is crying, this is deep, bro, is because he has lost such faith in himself that a little girl. Now, you would think if you're a seasoned actor, you wouldn't have to listen to the opinion of a little girl, but she's smart. The fact that the little girl put him over was enough to move him, because he's so insecure about himself that was enough to emotionally move him. That was deep, bro. That was very deep writing.
That was a great scene. And also, another little nod to New Hollywood. She was doing that method acting, which a lot of the old actors didn't know what the fuck it was. Method acting is a lot of shit like fucking Jake Gyllenhaal does and Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, of course. The one that the modern fans would know is The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger. That's the one that everybody goes over.
They become the characters 24/7.
Yeah. Don't call me that. Call me this type thing.
So the little girl's telling this is funny scene, bro. The little girl's telling her strategy of acting, and Rick Dalton's so expressive, like, what the fuck is that? Like, I'm just here to do a job and perform and go home. But she's telling him, no, I become the actor. That whole fucking artsy fartsy shit.
Right.
So that was a cool little. See, you pick up on all these little things that, again, you have to kind of be into cinema to get it. So again, no blame placed on anybody if they don't really understand that part.
The movie's interesting because it really did remind me, like, one thing I liked about the movie is that, and this is very deep here, deep meta stuff, the movie feels like a movie from that era. Like, legit it does, because I've got old movies from those days on Criterion. For example, I watched Rosemary's Baby recently, and Rosemary's Baby is really good at building up tension, but what makes Rosemary's Baby a brilliant movie, it really hit me this time, is that the main character figures out exactly what's going on in the first act of the film. Roman Polanski tells you that the neighbors are demonic, satanic worshipers, and that this and this and this happen, right? And throughout the movie, he's trying to convince you that it's not true, but he had already told you it was true. And I felt like this movie, the way it was paced with the dialogue, actually felt like a movie from 1969.
So the entire Rick Dalton
purposely.
arc. So the entire Rick Dalton arc is him coming to terms that he's no longer relevant. It all takes place on the Lancer set. It's all there, which is gonna lead to one of my criticisms of the film in a little while. So we're dealing with Rick Dalton, and like you said, he goes through all the range of emotions. He goes into Lancer as a complete failure. He has no confidence. He doesn't know what the fuck is going on with this new Hollywood shit. And then when he finally hits that scene, he gets his confidence back, but not because he's gonna be the it guy again. He just understands this is how it's gonna be, and he's got to react from here on in with that situation. I love that stuff. The only problem with that is that ends like there's still a whole nother act when the movie kind of ends in a lot of ways when they go back and they watch the program FBI when Cliff Booth and him go back after they reunite,
right,
and then they're both happy.
It's like a fourth act almost tagged on at the end, but I'm glad they tagged it on. Yeah.
Cliff Booth kind of comes back after the whole ranch scene, and he comes back to kick it with Rick, and then Rick comes back from the film set, and they're just happy. You see that they're now in a cathartic state. They went through this catharsis, and they just watch his show, and they laugh, and then it goes to black, and then we cut to 6 months later, which is weird. Like all of a sudden, because Rick Dalton ends up going to Italy to do the spaghetti westerns, and then he becomes a big star there. And then he gets married, which is the reason he can't afford Cliff Booth anymore. And what's interesting there, another little life lesson, is that Rick Dalton was catastrophizing. He didn't even understand that there was a whole nother career for him in Italy, which again happened to a lot of people. Max von Sydow ended up becoming a big star again with the spaghetti western. Same thing with Clint Eastwood. He had to go to Italy to become a big star, and then he came back. So the whole idea there was that Rick Dalton was he was way overstressing this, and it affected his confidence, whereas Cliff Booth knew the whole time, because again, what he's been through, that everything was going to work out and everything was going to be fine. And I love that. But then the movie doesn't end.
No, and that's what I'm saying. I did think the film was a bit too long. I mean, I even though you're making more sense some of these scenes, I do feel that it could have been shaved down a bit. I really do feel that way. But again, there is a lot of bait and switch, like the cliff scene where he's on the plantation or whatever you want to call it, like that. There was some
the ranch, bro.
The ranch, whatever, bro. We're talking about Dr. D earlier. So that whole scene, I think, could have been shortened. He built up tension for that Bruce Dern appearance. Because we're over here thinking, like, obviously as you're watching the film, you're like, okay, what's going to happen here? Like, is he dead? That's the first thing you think of, that maybe he died in the movie and that he didn't want him to find out. Because we had just got done watching Midsommar, a month before? And that scene reminded me a heck of a lot of Midsommar, bro. So I'm over here thinking the guy's all mutilated, but instead he's there, he's blind, they're still friends. I like that, but I think it could have been shaven down for time.
Well, that's another thing that didn't work for me in this movie, because one of the things that Tarantino always does, he's great with tension. Like, he's done it in all his movies. Of course, we have the classic part at the bar in Inglourious Basterds.
We have the breakfast scene in Pulp Fiction. We got the Mexican standoff.
All this shit. He's always done
every movie has at least one.
The dinner scene in Django, which is amazing. But here it didn't work for me, bro. I never, because I don't know. But then again, I've talked to other people, including the Ecuadorian, and they said that it did work for them. So I'm okay with that. Like, it just didn't work for me because I never felt, and maybe because I knew how badass Cliff Booth was, I never felt that he was in danger in that scene. Even though that's what I felt Tarantino wanted us to feel, I never felt that he was.
I mean, he did beat up Bruce Lee just a few minutes prior to that in the movie.
He launched him, bro.
Into the car, bro. And it was awesome. I like that scene a lot.
That ranch scene didn't really work for me. And so now I will say this: they did build up Tex pretty good. I do love what Tarantino did when he introduced it to Tex, because he was kind of like the alpha male of that ranch.
And for those who don't know, Tex was actually one of the real people involved. Yeah, there were real people involved. Yeah. What about Quentin Tarantino being the director of the Red Apple cigarettes ad? I didn't catch this when I first saw the film.
Yeah, that was cool, bro. That was a great scene.
Yeah.
And I got lucky because I saw it twice when it opened. I saw it a week before it opened, and then I saw it like a couple days after. I saw it with good audiences. People were jumping up and down at the right spots. People were laughing. So I got lucky in that sense because.
Right. Well, everything with Cliff was great, though. To me, that was the best character in the film. I'm going to keep saying that forever. Tarantino wrote him perfectly.
But Tarantino just knows how to write comedy, bro. Like, and the thing about Tarantino is that he doesn't write that pratfall fucking Three Stooges comedy. I mean, he could because he kind of did it in other movies, but just that dialogue infused comedy where you just these
Dark
guys
comedy.
they're so fluid, bro. Like there's a fluidity to his comedy where it's just this back and forth. And I know that a lot of it is the casting, but yeah, no, I love that stuff because this movie's like really, really funny in a lot of parts. Like it never goes beyond a couple minutes without him throwing some sort of punchline that's very subtle in a lot of ways, but also very direct in other ways. And I love that. I love how he does that.
What about the fact that DiCaprio is still making a lot of money and is an A-list star and he hasn't done a single MCU movie? What about that one? Think about that. No comic book movie at all.
Well, maybe they'll grab him. Eventually, they gotta cast more movies, bro.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe he will be. He will be. Just like Keanu Reeves, bro. It's inevitable they'll be in the MCU, bro.
It's like Thanos. They're inevitable.
All I know, bro, is that a scene with DiCaprio and J.K. Simmons, bro, it's gonna put a smile on my face, bro. Just that's good enough for me.
Is there any villain that you would like to see DiCaprio play, like that hasn't been introduced?
I think he could be a great Sentry, but Sentry's not. Oh, he could be. Dude, he could be Adam Warlock. He even looks like Adam Warlock. It's just that Adam Warlock's too serious for him, I feel.
So going back to what we're talking about, how the movie kind of ends when they're watching the TV show together, he did that in Django as well, bro. Because if you remember when Calvin Candy and Dr. King die, like the movie
That's
kind of
at the end of the movie, yeah. It's like that extra act at the end is like extra stuff. It's very similar.
Django still has to go back to kill Sam Jackson's character.
That's right.
Who's the real villain of the movie.
That's right. They're the traitor.
That takes another 30 minutes. It's still like another 30, 40 minutes. And that's another one where it's like kind of slows down a lot right there. So I guess you could say that Tarantino has he just does that. And I don't know if it's good or bad. Probably bad because, we've all felt it. Like it kind of lags a little bit. But it's just the way he makes movies, bro. So we just have to put up with that.
Yeah, no, I know. But again, I like the movie a lot. I still did not feel that it was... I didn't think it was as good as some of his other films, bro. Like, I would put it closer to the lower end of his movies. Now, all his movies are good. I'm not saying it wasn't good, but...
The less good one, you would say. You can't say he's never made a bad movie.
No, but you can't when you compare it to Kill Bill. Because he did better things than Kill Bill. Kill Bill was a better revenge story. Django was a better revenge story overall, I think. Better heel, I think, in Django than... I think DiCaprio was better in Django as a heel. And then you have Hateful Eight. Like, I think those are just better movies overall. Like, he executed things better, I think, in those movies.
But I think this one's better than, like, Death
Proof
or Jackie Brown.
This one's more personal, I think, for him.
Yes.
And I would agree with you. I think it is better than Death Proof and Jackie Brown.
And so, I mean, I wouldn't argue with you if you want to put it in the lower tier, because at the end of the day, they're all his 9 films are great. Like, so it doesn't really matter.
So what's next, bro? Kill Bill 3 or Star Trek? Because I don't know which one I want to see more. Actually, probably Star Trek, to be honest with you, because I think the Kill Bill story was told pretty well in those other two movies or other.
What about when he gives us the 1-2 punch of like Luke Perry, and then he turns to the left and there's Clifton Collins Jr., bro?
Of course, bro.
Now, yep. One of the things that I like about the Lancer scenes is that they were being filmed like if you're watching the television show. Like they didn't do that gimmick where they actually show the camera only towards the end when the director with that Peter Fonda looking guy with the white hair would be in the seat, but that was rare. It was mostly done like if the show we're watching.
I love how they rearranged the camera for the second take. It was great. That was good stuff.
Yeah, so no, I love this movie, bro. It's probably my second favorite movie of the year. And I've seen some good ones this year, thankfully, but this one was up there. I honestly believe
Dark Phoenix, your number one, right? You said.
Bro, don't remind me about that fucking atrocity.
By the way, I did not realize that Kevin Smith's daughter was in this movie also, bro. I completely missed that until I
until later. Actually, before we get out of here, I gotta put over all the Madsen family because there was a lot of good actresses there. The one that played Pussycat, I thought she was great, bro. The one that's in the car.
What was her name, bro?
I don't remember her name. She's new.
Yeah, she Margaret Qualley.
Yes, she's gonna blow up, but she was good. Ethan Hawke.
Dakota Fanning, bro. I didn't even recognize her.
Yeah, she was.
I did recognize her, but I didn't know it was actually her. Yeah. She was Squeaky.
Squeaky, yeah, which was a real person too.
Yes.
Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke's daughter was in here as well.
Yeah.
Child. So yeah, he cast a lot of Daniel Harris was in here for a little bit as a pregnant.
And there's Michael Madsen was there, bro, as the sheriff on Bounty Law, bro. That's right. Popped when I saw him, bro. You know what though? And again, Tim Roth recorded.
Well, he got cut out.
I was gonna say he got cut out, but I do want to see what scene he did. when it comes out on
Now in
Blu-ray.
the credits, he gets a credit, but he says cut out. It says Tim Roth, and then in parentheses, he got cut out.
I like that. I mean, it's one of our boys, bro. Like I hope that we see the deleted scene someday.
Zoe Bell was in it as Kurt Russell's wife.
And what sucks about Tarantino movies, bro, honestly, is that, and you and I have talked about this a lot, is that in some cases the characters are so good that you actually want sequels. Like I know it's a joke about like the Tarantino like cinematic, but like we talked about this. We both talked about, wouldn't it be great if we got a prequel with the Vegas brothers, or what happened to Jules after Pulp Fiction? What happened to him? Like, you know, like there's stories that we want to see more of. Like I want to see more Cliff Booth. I want to see more Bruce Lee. We're never gonna get it, but I want to see more, and we're never gonna get it. And that's what sucks about it.
Yeah, well, that was his point. I mean, he's more of he wants you to want to hang out with these characters over and over again, and that's what gives these films rewatchability. You know, so I honestly feel like these kind of movies this film in particular, I think is gonna really grow in stature as the years go on, and people really kind of start to understand what he was trying to tell us, you know, because at the end of the day, it was his love letter to Hollywood. It was his love letter to a time, an era that's no longer is gone, and we'll never see that era again. Just like just like where we're at now. Right now we're at a crossroads as far as what
filmmakers
to do. So I honestly believe that that's what he was trying to say, and as more people understand that, then this film is going to be way more appreciated. And these characters are gonna grow in like cult status because they're great characters, bro. I mean,
also, did you hear the rumor about how Bruce Lee's family was pissed off about? Oh God.
Well, yeah. Shannon Lee was upset. Not Brandon Lee, because he's been dead for years, unfortunately. But his sister Shannon was really upset because he kind of made him into a joke.
But he was, I don't know. I thought it was still pretty cool.
Even though he's got on record as saying that he idolizes that guy and always puts him over.
Of course, he's a legend.
And of course, let's talk about the soundtrack. Another great soundtrack, which is, par for the course with Tarantino films, bro. Always a great fucking soundtrack.
Yeah, I think he used the Mamas and the Papas, right?
He only used songs that were around in that came out in 1969.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, that makes perfect sense. That's part of the story.
And then one of the reasons why I like the driving scenes, especially when Cliff Booth was driving, is because he created the entire city again back like 1969, bro. So you saw a lot of like the old theater banners and like lighting and stuff.
Yeah, that was very accurate. And plus, he also had Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show, which is not Bruce Pritchard, by the way. That's a Neil Diamond song. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So let me see what else. No, this is a great film. I mean, it has so many incredible scenes. The flamethrower scene, like you said, it's a throwback to the beginning of the movie when Rick Dalton was being a pussy about it, and he didn't want to turn on the flamethrower because it was hot, and so it comes back later on as a good little nod to the beginning of the movie. So many film references. I love that he created actual posters for Rick Dalton of all his movies,
and realistic looking ones too. That's how they looked back then with that kind of style art. I forgot the name of that artist, bro, but he's pretty well known.
Yeah, I forgot his name as well, but yeah, they were all there, and
they were all parodies of real movies.
That's right, they sure were, of spaghetti westerns and stuff like that. So I don't know, I really enjoy this film, bro. I don't know what else to talk about.
Oh, and don't forget, I love
the criticism.
The fact that the TV shows were so accurate back then. 'Cause I grew up on those shows on Nick at Night. The 4:3 aspect ratio and the black and white, all that stuff was very well done.
Yep.
So yeah, not a perfect movie. I don't think it's his best, but I think it's worth seeing, and I think you're right. I think over time it will get appreciated more.
Right, and let's put over Bruce Dern, bro. I thought that was supposed to be Burt Reynolds, but he passed away, unfortunately.
I never knew that.
Yeah, so he called Bruce Dern up at the end, and because this entire movie is pretty much a love letter to Burt Reynolds, but Burt Reynolds was supposed to play George Spahn, and then when he passed away, he gave it to Bruce Dern. But there's a lot going on there. Obviously, that's not on the script. It's very subtle as far as George Spahn, like, does he know what's going on with all these fucking maniacs in his ranch, but he's so lonely that he'd rather have that than have nothing? Or is he really just so gullible and naive that he doesn't really understand what's going on? They don't really tell us that, which is good, because you kind of want to figure it out on your own. But that scene with Cliff Booth, where you could see how sad Cliff Booth is to see, because you could tell that Cliff Booth kind of I don't want to say idolized him, but he respected George Spahn because he worked with them, years ago in that ranch when they were making movies.
That's
and now
right.
he comes back and he sees a shell of his former self there in the bed. He's blind, and there's a lot that's said without actually saying anything, and so I really appreciated that scene. It's not my favorite scene in the movie. That's the book scene, but it's up there.
Yeah, I think my favorite scene in the movie is the end. I think it is the flamethrower scene. I really enjoyed that scene, but actually, I think my real favorite scene in the movie is the Bruce Lee fight with a Cliff. But also, my other favorite scene is DiCaprio in the trailer cussing himself out.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It was great. It was great. So, anyways, that's it for the spoiler review. Went 40 minutes here. So go check out the movie. If you disagree, leave a comment. It's a very polarizing film. I was surprised that some people have said they hated the movie. I don't know. I mean, I get it being too long and having some boring parts, but I think hate's kind of a strong word.
I just think it's misunderstood. I think that's a better word for it.
Midsummer had that same issue too, where it felt very dragged out. But I think that one actually was way more dragged out than this one, and it had less likable characters. In fact, that movie had no likable characters, bro, at all. You can't relate to nobody in that movie, bro.
Yeah, but that movie was trying to say something else.
Oh, I know it was. No, I know. And you're right. But they could have. But we talked about this. They could have said something else in less time.
I agree with you there, bro. That is a fact.
But much respect to him and Tarantino and even the Key and Peele guy for doing these movies that are theirs and not like make Hollywood.
That's right, and that's really what we should be focusing on. The fact that we're finally, after all these years, and here it is, bro. I'm gonna go ahead and connect all these things. Put it in a nice little bowl. I honestly believe that we have Kevin Feige to thank for that, and not only that, we also have like you said, the Peele. He really opened up doors. There's a couple filmmakers that have really opened up doors. Jordan Peele. All it took is a couple movies making money, and all of a sudden these producers are like, look, there's a fan base for these.
And a couple of them are horror movies too.
Yeah.
And and James Wan did it a few years ago too.
James Wan, yeah.
We got a list of guys coming up.
So we really have to thank them for giving us the option to if you want movies that have a little more substance to them, they're there now, and we have to support them. So that's why go check this movie out, and at the end of the day, even if it drags a little bit, I don't think it's ever boring.
And the important thing is the ending was satisfying, and if you walk out of a movie with a satisfying ending, it makes the whole movie better.
That's the biggest high spot right there, brother.
Yeah. This was not WrestleMania 25 with Triple H and Randy Orton. That's not what this was.
No, it wasn't.
This was WrestleMania 10, where it was two great matches and a great ending, and that's what's important. It's true.
So Doink the Clown and Bam Bam Bagolo, and what other one?
Come on, bro.
Fake Bill Clinton was also a surprise in that.
That's right. And Burt Reynolds was on that show as well, bro. I made two references to that show. So, all right. Well, we'll talk to y'all next time. Thanks for being here, Brandon Draven from KLB.
Cool.
Bye.